Welcome, everyone. This is a call. Thank you for joining. It's EWOC, DSA, and UE. We're excited to have everyone on. It looks like we already have 144 people, which is really exciting. My name is Megan Swabda. I'm a DSA member based in New York City, and I'm an organizer with EWOC. So, just to get us started, what is EWOC? EWOC is the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, which is a joint effort between DSA's Democratic Socialist Labor Commission and the United Electrical Radio Machine Workers of America, or UE. Our work is to support workers organizing at their workplaces for better protections, higher pay, paid time off, and more during COVID-19. Since the project started in mid-March, we've had over 500 volunteers sign up to organize with EWOC, and we've had more than 1,500 workers reach out to us. We've been organizing with workers in more than 30 states. Today on the call, we're going to have a discussion with some of the workers who have gotten critical support from EWOC. We're going to hear from essential workers and returning workers about how they organized and won better protections and pay. We're going to hear from public service employees from UE about how they're fighting for better pay and protections during COVID-19. And we're going to have a discussion about how we take the fight for Black Lives Matter into the workplace, which is an incredibly important thing for us to be talking about and discussing today. So to get us started, we are going to hear from two wonderful people, two movement leaders and organizers who are very dear to EWOC, who are going to help us frame the current moment and look for lessons as we're moving ahead. Unfortunately, one of our comrades, Roz, is unable to join us. We're wishing her a speedy recovery, and we're looking forward to talking with her more in the future. But today we do have with us Bianca Cunningham. Bianca is a former Verizon wireless worker who led her coworkers in 7 stores across Brooklyn, New York to join CWA in 2014, making them the first unionized retail workers in the company. She co-founded DSA's Afro-Socialist and Socialists of Color Caucus, a caucus for Black, Indigenous, and people of color within Democratic Socialists of America. And she also served as the co-chair of the NYC chapter of DSA for 2 terms. She is now a staff at Labor Notes, where she facilitates trainings on race, economic inequality, and workplace organizing. We're also going to be hearing from Mike Davis. Mike is a 74-year-old writer and lifelong activist who lives in San Diego. His most recent books, Set the Night on Fire, LA in the 60s with John Weiner, and The Monster Enters, COVID-19 Avian Flu, and the Plagues of Capitalism. In his younger years, he worked as a heavy-duty truck driver and was active in the Teamsters rank and file movement. So, to get the conversation started, I was hoping, Bianca, we could hear from you a little bit about what you think the relationship between the uprisings and the movement in the streets for Black lives, and how that connects to this historic moment of self-activity among essential workers that we've been seeing since the pandemic really started.
Yeah, so thank you, Megan. Hey, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to DSA and EWOC for having me tonight. I'm so excited to have this discussion with all of you, Mike, and everyone else. How is this all connected? I was thinking about this earlier, and for me, it really starts even before COVID. And so I was thinking about my timeline. I organized in Verizon Wireless at the store about 6 years ago. And I remember at the same time in 2014 that we were organizing first retail union in Verizon Wireless. There were a couple of things happening. So one, in 2014, almost a year ago, yesterday, was the anniversary of the Mike Brown murder. And also in 2014, Eric Garner was murdered by the NYPD almost a month earlier. So to me, I feel like I came into the labor movement kind of seeing all of this activity around Black Lives Matter and even back then, and then also seeing a really big push from retail workers and low-wage workers for something called Fight for 15, which we all thought was really exciting at the time. It sounded super radical, but there was movement in the streets. I participated in many strikes alongside fast food workers from Burger King and other places where we literally shut down to say that we wanted to fight for $15 in a union. We were met with a bunch of criticism, a bunch of scoffs from the ruling class to say, How could you ever pay people $15 an hour? Why should people get paid $15 an hour to, flip a burger or man a cashier or whatever? And so, people were really upset about it, but it caught on, I believe, like amongst working class people. They were like, wow, well, we are worth more. Why hasn't the minimum wage gone up in so long? And so fast forward, you see this wave of teacher strikes, which is really important because many of them did not have the right to strike, did not have the institutional support from their unions. It is actually illegal for some of these places like West Virginia and Arizona and Kentucky to even go on strike in the first place. And you saw them not only go on strike, organize themselves, but also start to make some really big wins. And I feel like so much of what we're doing in the Socialist Project is demonstrating that we can win, right? Showing other people, these are the fights that you can take on, and you have a chance to win. So I think the teacher strikes are super important. Fast forward to Senator Bernard Sanders runs for the second time for president. And I think that, whether you supported Bernie or not for president, one thing that was very apparent, I think to everybody I know, regardless of where they fell on the political spectrum, is that the mainstream media and the ruling class had no intention of ever letting this man who was talking about the working class getting its fair share, who was talking about taking power away from the billionaires and the corporate class. Never in a million years did any of these folks have any intention on letting him, giving him a fair run. We saw how mainstream media was biased. They shut him down. Both political parties, Democrat and Republican, came together to collectively shut him down and call us all crazy for the ideas that we all believed in and how so much passion that we organized in the streets around, whether it was workplace organizing or knocking on doors for the campaign, or just the belief that all of us could live in a better world where we actually looked out for one another and people had their basic needs met. They scoffed in our face and they laughed. Well, then enter COVID. And all of a sudden, these workers who, why should they make $15 an hour, who weren't important, who were the gum on the bottom of the corporate and ruling class's shoe, are now deemed as heroes because they don't want to go to work, right? The ruling class isn't going to work during this, they're not going to work anyways. But the point is that all of a sudden, these folks are heroes. And it's like, and even then we see pulling teeth, and I'm sure many of these workers on tonight, I'm so excited to hear many of their stories, will talk about pulling teeth for basic necessities like PPE, the basic dignity and respect to come to work in a safe environment. Something like only 30% of Americans could have the ability to work remotely. That means 70% of us are essential. What does that say? That the corporate class is doing all the bidding, using government as a tool for all of us to work for them and make them all these billions of dollars overnight? Everything that Senator Sanders was talking about coming to life before our very eyes, all the inequalities, coming to life before our very eyes, who's impacted by COVID, who has to go to work. These are all questions about race and class, and there's so many intersections in gender. There's so many intersections around this issue, and people are seeing this play out. In the background, we have this racist, misogynist, xenophobic president who's just out of control. We see that neither Democrats or Republicans have any chance or even have any intention on reining him in. They're upset with how he's doing the message. They're not upset with what he's actually doing. They're feigning like, oh, we're so upset, but it's like they're both two sides of the same coin. We see how they operate. And, we're being barraged every single day by videos of police brutality, videos of Black and brown people and poor people being assaulted and murdered by the police. If you go on YouTube, it'll take you months and months and months to go through all the videos of the unjust murders and the unjust violence that the state inflicts on working people every single day. And so I think that all of this stuff is a perfect storm to what we see now, which is workers realizing not only does the government not care about me, but my boss, who I thought was really nice and who would probably do the right thing in most circumstances, also doesn't care about me. And I can't trust any of these people who I've been used to, that I've put my trust in. I can't trust any of these people to have me, my family's, or my community's well-being, in mind and trust them for them to act on our behalf in a positive way. And so I feel like what you're seeing now is just a total uprising and a distrust of almost all of the institutions in this country, rightfully so. and will continue. And I feel like right now is a really exciting intersection between workers rising up, organizing themselves, workers of color doing the same alongside in a multiracial, working class rebellion, but also the streets are just talking and they're speaking for us and they're loud, and it's a beautiful thing. And I feel like if we can stick together, we're really on the right path here.
I can tell everyone is clapping at home after that, Bianca. Thank you. That was such a wonderful way to start us off. I agree. The streets are talking, and there is something that we can build together. So Mike, I have another question that I'm hoping you could share some thoughts on. There's so much going on in America today. What are some of the driving forces that you see in American politics, society, and the economy? And what role do you think the essential workers today play in changing things? And what role can EWOC play in confronting this or supporting essential workers in their organizing work? Oh, Mike, you're muted.
Let me first say that one of the accomplishments of Black Lives Matter has been to save a generation of organizers who were plunging into the abyss of despair at the end of February and early March after Sanders conceded to Biden. And it, of course, had been the strategy and hope of the Sanders campaign that you could have the movement in the streets and in the workplaces, and you could have the political campaign, and each would nourish the other. But as we discovered at the end of February and March, that really wasn't the case. And thousands of activists were really left with nothing to do. Sanders and also Warren produced absolutely wonderful ideas for pro-worker legislation and for workplace safety, but it had become disembodied from any movement. Black Lives Matter, just like the Black liberation struggle in the 1960s or the Southern Civil Rights Movement, acted as a kind of huge power plant and discharging energy, adding energy to struggles of all kinds, and allowing thousands of people who otherwise would be locked in their homes, mourning the failure of the Sanders campaign, to become activists in every sense. Now, this country has moved in one single leap from a situation where structural reforms seemed possible, a period when it seemed that the Rooseveltian ideal of socioeconomic rights might be actually realizable. And we've gone from that into an entirely different situation. It's like working people went to bed one night in March, and they woke up the next day, and they looked out the window, and it was 1933 all over again. In fact, the socioeconomic indicators, levels of unemployment and so on, are very much the same as in the early Depression. Now, it's obviously a surpassingly complex task to organize in your workplace or campus, in your neighborhood, in your city, and at the same time conduct a struggle nationally. Two of the principal things that must be our targets as a whole for Black Lives Matter and for people who are fighting under that pattern for workplace safety and simply for working class survival in the dark period that we've now entered in. First of all, we should be firing our cannons incessantly at the crew of reactionaries who occupy the Francis Perkins building in Washington, D.C. Scalia's kid, Eugene, and his labor department run by enemies of labor. And also OSHA, which I think the Labor Department and OSHA together are, by any standard, accomplices in murder at the workplace, hundreds of times over. The Obama administration spent years putting together standards for infectious disease in the workplace, workers' rights. And these were to be enforceable, obligatory. And they were to be inaugurated when Hillary Clinton was in the White House. And of course, that ended the minute that Trump was elected. As of the end of May, I don't know what the count is now, but at the end of May, there were thousands, and now tens of thousands of complaints by workers who were having to make essentially Sophie's Choice. You recall that movie, Sophie is a Polish mother with two small kids, arrives at Auschwitz, begs the sadistic camp doctor to save her kids, take me and my kids. And he says, I'll do this. I'll let one kid survive. But if you don't choose instantly, then I'll die. Both your kids die. And millions of American workers have had to make that choice between vital income and their personal safety, the safety of members of their household. This has, of course, been particularly punishing, an example of multi-generational households. The working poor have been the principal target of all this. And the lack of, the absence of discomfort in the Labor Department is something we must correct. It must become very painful for them to do what they're doing now, which is selling out the working class. And the final point, of course, is we're in the midst of a corporate offensive. Okay, I mean, the private equity firms like Blackstone and others are using this as an opportunity to buy and loot hospitals, to expand private medicine at the cost of workers' safety and the rights of patients. The insurance companies, for whom the pandemic has been a windfall, since people aren't able to go to hospitals and seek chemotherapy or have operations, their profits are unparalleled. While at the same time, smaller regional medical centers and medical practices are becoming extinct. And of course, then there's the example of the biggest pandemic profiteer of all, Amazon, and Jeff Bezos, who in one single day became $12 billion richer. There's simply nothing in the annals of the robber barons, or for that matter, the Huns, or any of the great barbarians of history, that approaches this kind of thunder. And I wrote something months ago arguing for an excess profits tax on Amazon and the other profiteers. But of course, that's really, and that's an American tradition. There were excess profits tax during the First, Second World Wars and the Korean Wars. This is not a radical reform. But the point is now it's completely insufficient. We have to start making the case, as the old-time socialists did before the First World War, for the public ownership of essential utilities. These utilities now include the social media, the web, and the whole apparatus and infrastructure, logistics, and distribution. We live almost in a parody of the Gilded Age. It looks to me, every time I look out the window, I think, my God, the world looks just like the beginning of the movie Metropolis, when there are downbeaten, starving workers living in the lower depths and the billionaires living in, in the sky. And this is what we've come to. It's a real honor to be able to speak to so many young fighters. Thank you.
Mike, we are honored to have you here speaking with us. Thank you so much. I just have one more question that I'm hoping you both can take a little bit of time to speak to, and then we're going to turn it over to hear some amazing organizing stories from workers who have been fighting in their workplaces over the last few months. But you know, a lot of what both of you have said is that we need a multiracial working class movement that's both in the streets and in the workplaces. And I'm really, you know, just it's a challenging question, but in some ways it's simple. Like, what are our tasks, and what are the challenges in building this movement for us right now? And Bianca, will you start?
Sure. So for me, the urgent tasks are, number one, to make it count. So many of the new organizing that you see are not like these like large, you know, swaths of workers, hundreds of workers. You see some of that, but what you're seeing more of, or what I'm seeing more of right now, is things like what happened with me, right? Small shops of workers, 150 or less folks, organizing for improvements in their workplace. Well, that's great, and it's really inspiring, but the reality is that you don't have that much power in a company as 10 workers or even 100 workers, right? And so we really have to be creative ourselves, but also as labor, because I feel like some of these, you see there's organizing amongst game workers, amongst tech workers, amongst retail workers. There's all these types of occupations that you would have never thought would have you would have been able to unionize before, that are happening now, that makes it really exciting. But we've got to get creative about what leverage we have to actually get real wins for these folks, so that they're not totally traumatized by the whole union experience, thinking that they, you know, fought all of this for nothing. You know, so yeah, I mean, and so along those lines, I think we also have to find ways to connect the dots around messaging about labor, that it's not just about you and your boss. Number one, that everybody should have a union, regardless of whether your boss is great or not, whether your job is great or not, where you work, or what kind of job you have. You're entitled and you should have a union. So I think that we need to normalize that thinking, and not just whenever your boss is horrible or the corporation is evil and, you know, whatever. Like, we don't need to just react. We just need to be proactive about those ideas. I also think that, like, my experience of talking to Nissan workers when they were trying to organize in Mississippi doing door knocks, was that, like, they couldn't see the connection between the union and their actual, like, position in life, right? So they'll talk to me about the fact that, you know, this Nissan job is the best job that they've ever had. It's the highest paying job in town. They were homeless before this, or they didn't have a car, etc. And it's like talking to them about how labor plays a part of this larger movement that drives these forces, right? So is it your boss's, yeah, your boss, I guess, is the highest paying job in town, but why is that? And how can we start to tackle and like address those questions together in labor, and find space in the labor movement to do that, so that people see a connection, whether they're home or whether they're at work, that labor is going to be fighting on their side in a number of different areas. You've seen this recently with a number of the teachers' strikes, where they're fighting for, you know, affordable housing, or fighting around demands of getting, you know, stopping random searches of Black and brown students or all students in their schools. And so these are ways that we can expand the conversation to talk about different areas that are not just like the bread and butter work related stuff. I would say the challenges that we have, alongside, you know, the fact that we have to be creative, is that, you know, we have to manage our expectations. I'll never forget my first experience organizing in my store, being so elated that we won, then having to go bargain a contract for a year and a half, where it's like literally banging your head against the wall every single day, where the employer just has no intention of giving you anything. And then you realize quickly that it's not really about the money, it's more about the power and the control that they're after. And so managing that, and even after that, we did have to go on strike for 49 days. And then, you know, what happens is you go on strike for 49 days on a first contract when you have no idea what you're gonna get. And then you come back and they're like, okay, congratulations, you got grievance and arbitration. And you feel like you got punched in the gut, because you didn't get any worker protections, like as far as like, you know, layoff protections, you didn't get any wage raises, etc. And we just need to be real about the power that we had, right? And like what we could actually bargain. And so I think managing expectations is really, really super important. And I would just also say as a note, after we organized, we inspired some Massachusetts workers to organize in their store as well. And I was on their bargaining team. We bargained their first contract. They went on strike for 49 days and got their contract ratified. And within a month, the company closed that store. There was no recourse for us to take. It was well within the company's right to do so, and we had no language in the contract to address that. So what does it mean for somebody to take on this huge fight, put their livelihood on the line, and at the end of the day, that we leave the door open for the employer to come in and do things like that? We've got to stop and figure out a way that we can do better, and I know it's really hard. The other thing I'll just say quickly, and I want to make sure I leave time for Mike, is that we as the left have to start setting the media. We cannot let mainstream choose what they're going to cover, what they're not going to cover. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to cover working organizations. The only reason they're doing it now is because it's related to COVID and it's a sensationalized story. So we know that they're not on our side. And so we really need to support independent media and really, get that in our heads that the mainstream media is not our friend and we should not be listening to those narratives. And the last thing I'll say is that, the labor movement really has to figure out whose side they're on. We really need to divorce ourselves from the Democratic Party and labor. We cannot pretend to be on the side of working people if we're in bed with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has made it very clear that they have no intention and have had no intention of fighting for working families and working people across this country. And so as long as labor prioritizes their relationship with the Democratic Party over the prospect of the workers and the members themselves and working people in this country, they're going to see a lot of heartache. And I think it's on us to pressure them to say, Democrats are crap, Republicans are crap, we're on the side of the workers, where are you falling on this? And so that's what I have. And I just want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. That was really a rousing. The chat also started going off at the very end as you were speaking. So everyone at home is very excited by this. Mike, what do you think challenges, opportunities for us as we're building a multiracial working class movement in this moment?
Well, first of all, I want Bianca to know that I've recorded this, and every time I feel blue, I'm going to listen to what she just said again. Look, we need to use institutions without relying or trusting on them, as Bianca said about the Democratic Party. But that also includes the Progressive Caucus in Congress. It includes the most activist unions, like the SEIU. We cannot allow them to set the pace and control the agenda of the struggle. We must synchronize our activism to the anger of young rank and file people, to the urgency of their needs and struggles. And this will lead to sometimes unpleasant scenes, extravagant gestures. Maybe you wouldn't sit down and that if you thought about them actually choose to try and burn down the federal building or something. But anger is such an important part of the energy and the raison d'etre of the movement right now. I mean, we have the perception things are in a horrible state, but the reality on the ground is 10 times worse than that. And we're going to see in this fall millions of people in mortal distress that hasn't been visible on such a huge scale since the 1930s. Two things are joined together right now, particularly amongst the under 30 generation of working people. On one hand, you've had the relentless assaults on civil rights and equality, okay, which has produced heroic resistance through Black Lives Matter movement and so many other local struggles. And secondly, you have the unprecedented downward mobility of this generation. I see this acutely in a way because my 2 youngest kids, who are identified as Mexican, go to an inner city high school. And their generation just doesn't, see any real hope outside of root and branch radical reform. I've been totally unsuccessful convincing my two younger kids to cast a vote for Biden. They don't want it, and none of their friends do. But they've been active in the protests in San Diego within their gangs, within the group of kids they hang out with. And the press puts so much attention on white participation in the protests, what strikes me is far more important. It's been the way that immigrant kids, people of color in every dimension have joined together about BLM and have understood responsibility to act. I mean, this is a generation of lions, and it has to, they have to, lead us in many circumstances where perhaps we would be more conscious, or we would say, well, what does Bernie really think about this? What does he say? And again, Bianca, thank you. I'm going to go out and make myself a hot fudge sundae after this.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Thank you both so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. And it's just the beginning. It's just the first part of the conversation we're going to have tonight. So next we're going to hear from some people who've been organizing in their workplaces. And I just want to, I'm looking at the clock, and I really wanted to give a lot of time to hear from Mike and Bianca. So I'm really glad we did. And I also just want to say, I think we might go a few minutes over, maybe 10 to 15. So if you need to leave, please feel free to, but I hope you stick around to really hear all of the stories and all of the incredible organizing that has been going on across the country. So thank you, Bianca and Mike. Please stick around. But I'm going to introduce some incredible people. So I'm going to introduce to us, first off, we have Bryce Carter. Bryce is president of UE Local 150, the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, North Carolina. We have Monisa Ahmed, Field Museum employee in Chicago. John Foster is here with us, Taco Bell employee from Detroit. And Chance Martin, Jimmy John's worker from Salt Lake City. Thank you all so much for coming, for getting on the call, joining us to tell us a little bit about some of the incredible work you all have been up to. So just to get us started, I'm going to ask a question, and John, I was hoping that you could maybe you could answer first.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what the conditions were like in your workplace, and what you did to win safety protections, and what demands you won there at Taco Bell?
So at the beginning of March here in Michigan, the executive order came down. All bars and restaurants were closed. My job was very much up in the air. But when we found out that fast food workers were going to remain open, I called my regional manager. And I said to her, what are we looking at? What if one of us catches COVID? What is going to happen when we get sick? Are we going to be paid time off? Other places and other shops and other stores are getting hazard pay. Is that something we can look at? And she basically told me, no, that's not an option. That's not possible. We can't afford it. Shot me down. The mood in the store, I wasn't the only one who reached out to her. The mood in the store became very down, of course, because of that. I'm a DSA member, and I heard about the EWOC team. They shot out an email, and in April, I thought, hey, what the heck? What have I got to lose just by reaching out to EWOC? They put me in contact with our organizer, Tristan, who has been very helpful with that. When we decided to organize our shop based on a petition, the Jimmy John store actually kind of got inspiration from that a little bit, but we asked for a $3 an hour hazard pay increase. We asked for 4 weeks of paid sick leave, and also the situation with PPE and sanitizing cleaning supplies was either non-existent or they didn't have a plan. We weren't doing temperature screenings at the door for our employees for a while. But we put this petition together. We got 90% of our store on board. And then we presented it to the boss. And on the same day we presented it to our owners, we actually did TV and radio press interviews with the newspapers. And on that same day, we began doing health screenings at the door. we actually won one of our demands just by delivering the petition. Shortly thereafter, we won the other two petitions. Now, we only won $2 an hour hazard pay, and we only got 2 weeks of paid sick leave. But what's significant is that our store, we're in an 8-store franchise, our store was the only one presenting this petition, but our boss actually gave it to all of the stores, which is really fantastic that they did that.
Monisa, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the conditions at your work and what you and your coworkers were organizing for.
Sure, thanks, Megan. So yeah, at the museum, things were a little bit disproportionate and odd. So as soon as the pandemic hit and the order came down from the governor and the mayor here in Illinois/Chicago to shelter in place and stay at home, and no one who needed to work needed to stay home, the museum at large was very confused because we have a mixture of people who work behind the scenes in sort of a full-time staff way, people who can work at home, people who can fully remote sort of get the job done. And then we had all of our front-facing staff, we had our housekeeping staff, we had our security staff, we had staff who were taking care of the collections at the museum who were so essential that this rule didn't apply to them. At our museum especially, those front-facing staff, the ones who are, at the low-wage end of the spectrum, the ones that are there to interact with visitors, who is the museum's top priority, are the majority of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color staff. And what we saw in the coming weeks and months was just, a frenzy of layoffs and furloughs and an institution-wide pay cut. And, amidst all of this, we were having talks with our president to kind of gauge, what was going on, what is the museum doing with all of its funding and all of its money, and, this endowment that it has, and like what percentage of visitor income is really going to affect this. And what we got back in response was just a lot of vagueness and a lot of, we can't divulge that, and a lot of, if we were to take graduated pay cuts at the top where the executives are and the president is, that would be considered an empty gesture. And so that was incensing. And, especially because so many of us just didn't know what was happening to our front-facing part-time staff, who were all getting furloughed, but then simultaneously asked back as soon as the museum could reopen, and were endangering themselves because of that. We tried doing this, giving off individual comments to our managers to pass along, and that was just proving to be really ineffective. And so we knew we had to come together and do something that not only organized us as a institution of like 700 employees or something like that, but also to bring in our public audience, to bring in the museum's members, the people who, the museum cares about so much, the money they care about so much. And we knew we needed to get those people on board too, because they weren't going to stand to see us treated like this. And so, our first step was kind of to demand equity and transparency from the people at the top, especially in the way of like, where's our money going? How much income do visitors really bring in? And is it, necessary to keep people on payroll? And the answer was no. The museum could fully fund and keep us all on pay and protect their staff without having to necessarily reopen or endanger anyone or take a pay cut. And so we organized in that way, created a petition, spread it as much as we could to other museum folks across the industry and the country, and presented that to our leadership with a 2,000 signatures or something like that. And it was mostly met with radio silence, but that just convinced us to work harder.
Yeah, I think that really goes to a point that Bianca made at the beginning, right? Of how we set our expectations and how we think about what we're shooting for, and then how we keep going. Thank you for sharing that, Monisa. Chance, what were your working conditions like? What were you all organizing for? If you have any wins, what would you share with us?
Well, my experience sounds like it was pretty similar to John's. Initially, like much of the rest of the country, when COVID started to become a very obvious issue, many, different states decided to do various levels of shutdown. Initially, here in Salt Lake City, for only a few weeks back in March, they just decided, code red or whatever the way that they graded it worked, and basically that just meant no customers allowed inside retail stores or restaurants. In the case of the Jimmy John's that I worked at, and but just a few weeks after that, they kind of just decided, I suppose, oh, we're kind of bored of this. Let's just go ahead and start easing restrictions without any scientific merit, because obviously cases were just continuing to go up. So we the city made that announcement, and then pretty soon after that, the owners of our company decided that just wholesale across the 40 or so locations that our franchise owns, they were just going to start letting people back in the store. So just a few days prior to hearing or finding out that it was going to happen, I quickly, same day, started voicing my concerns to a handful of the coworkers that I saw that day. And we were all like, this just isn't fair. There's no possible way that I can, just sit back and let this happen, because I don't want to risk my health or the health of the people coming into the store or other coworkers. So we decided to draft a petition with a list of demands, and started talking to some of our coworkers. We were eventually able to convince just over half of the people at our location, so roughly about 12 of the 20 people. And we delivered a petition directly to our general manager stating 4 things that we wanted, one of which was not allowing people into the store until we saw a 2-week decrease in cases. Better social distancing markers on the floor, so when people were allowed back in the store, there was a clear distinction where 6 feet goes. And then better plexiglass barriers in order to protect us from particulates. And then the final thing that we never ended up getting was paid time off in case people got sick. We were initially asking for 30 days of that, and they never gave it to us. But on delivering the petition, they immediately disallowed customers in the store for a time, and set up a captive audience meeting with us. And we basically met with the bosses, talked to them about it. We grilled them a little bit about why they couldn't do this, because they hit us with the standard, oh, it's just not, we can't afford it. Attempted to get them to basically prove that to us, and they didn't show us any numbers to prove that. And so same day, we also talked to various people in the media as well who, listened to our story and aired it locally. And so fortunately, we were able to keep customers out of the store for a couple of months. And eventually, unfortunately, we lost a bit of momentum in the campaign, and they decided that they were just going to start allowing customers back in the store regardless of what we had to say about it. And so at that point, I actually ended up quitting at that location, because I just couldn't justify showing up there every day and risking my personal health if I wasn't going to be able to ensure that we could organize further. But we still saw some moderate successes, so I'm pretty proud of what we were able to accomplish in that time.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about what it's like to be organizing right now. I'm Bryce. I'm really curious, as a member of the public service workers union, I'm curious what conditions were like for you all, and what it was like organizing during COVID-19 for you and your local.
With our local, being public sector workers, we are dealing with the public. Even during the COVID, most of our members were still dealing with folks from the public. Our chapters, our DHHS chapters, which is the mental health hospitals in North Carolina, our city workers, our university workers, still dealing with, still have to deal with the public. Some of the conditions with the DHHS workers, mental health workers, there were patients that were tested positive for COVID. Some of our members ended up testing positive. Most of our members have some prior health issues, and that was a big concern for our local. Even though they would have patients quarantined, in another room or so next to some of our workers and claiming that it would be safe, but there was no filter, no safe ventilation practices or anything like that. And like I said, some of my members still ended up getting COVID with city workers, with sanitation workers still out to the public when it comes to trash collection and whatever else that can be in the trash and at the time. And other services like water resources, street maintenance, even our Parks and Rec folks at the different cities. Of course, the cities made changes as far as we call modified schedules, having crews come in at different times, ended up shutting down some of the rec centers. But our biggest concern was those members who work with the rec centers to be paid during that time when they were shut down. Our university workers, they would make a transition. People were going home, students were going home, but the housekeepers, groundskeepers are still working. A few of our graduate workers are still working. Of course, now schools are starting back up, and that's a big concern for our members at the university. And they have been active with rallies, town forums, getting in the face of these chancellors, these governor boards, presenting letters, petitions. I will say, right recently, there's been 600 signatures of petitions with our universities, of course, really over several universities in our chapters since then. And then during the DHHS, and this was in the beginning, because we sent letters, when COVID started, we sent letters to all of the management of the different chapters, no matter if it was city council, the mayor, city manager, university chancellors, our DHHS, their director, and the other executive management. And then also we have a private sector company that's part of our union, which is Cummins Diesel Engine plant in Rocky Mount, and they actually presented letters to their management as well. So we all started with these letters, and then we move on into our campaign, sticker campaign, and petitions that was with this. Our sticker campaign was Save Jobs, Save Lives campaign. And this sticker campaign was successful. I mean, it was many of our chapters across the state had these stickers on. Big support, and really from all this during the campaign, we're actually able to organize, and we signed up many members from this campaign. Of course, after all these bigger petitions, we had individual petitions in the different universities and cities, just really getting workers, engaging workers. I mean, that's something that we can rally around. I mean, no matter where you come from, however you deal with, everybody wants some sort of safe workplace. So we use that to organize.
That actually directly leads into the next question, which is what motivated you and your coworkers to organize? I think this is a really important question for us to grapple with. What got you and your coworkers to start moving? And I was wondering, Monisa, if you could share a little bit about what motivated you and your coworkers to start organizing in the face of all of this.
So sort of going back to what I said before, a lot of what motivated us was our experience, talking to our leadership, our president, any of the executives on the museum board, sort of in the face of a pandemic, because as we were, asking about salary transparency and what we can do to prevent layoffs and what we can do to prevent furloughs, and is there any wiggle room for people to donate vacation time, and all of these things that everyone was trying to come together to ask about, among them, they were consistently shut down with really vague answers. But the one that really got us all was a question to our president, who makes $750,000 a year, which I think is something ridiculous. Like, he makes what I make in a year in a single paycheck or something like that. And that is for a full-time staff member right now. And when asked, why would you take the same pay cut that someone who makes significantly less money than you would take? Why would a part-time staff member take a 10% pay cut compared to you? Is there a potential to do higher pay cuts at the top if we can't get rid of these altogether? And the answer was that that would be an empty gesture, even though that would save tons of jobs. And so, like I said before, that incensed us. And, you know, as we moved forward and as we continued to ask questions and we continued to demand more of our executive board to like protect their workers, you know, we were getting less and less information. We were hearing less about when other people were going back into the building. We were hearing less about what sort of PPE and you know, hazard pay they were giving to those workers. What, like, were they covering transportation in a city where all of those employees, for the most part, rely on public transportation? And again, we were met with, you know, we can't disclose that, we can't really talk about that. But on the public facing side, it was all, you know, messaging about caring about our employees and caring about their safety and caring about our visitors. And, you know, look at this cute video of penguins walking in the museum to distract you from all the other stuff that, you know, our employees were sort of going through. And so that, you know, that and sort of coupled with a history of being an institution that just like, you know, was born and bred on really terrible things like colonialism and like Native American genocide, and it has these objects that they tend to care about more than people, you know, it became abundantly clear to us that unless we fight for our rights as a collective and get people outside of the museum to sort of see what we're going through, you know, we're going to continue to be complacent and things aren't going to change. And we're going to see another 100 years of the same behavior towards staff. So yeah, that was sort of the biggest thing that motivated us.
It's very motivating. Chance, I'm wondering what motivated you and your coworkers at Jimmy John's to start organizing.
Well, I just want to say before I start that Monisa, that was on point. I loved that. And I think it kind of rings true to a lot of where I came from this personally. I've been very much so staunchly on the left for years now. I very much so think that labor always gets shafted in these kinds of situations. So I was definitely already mentally prepared for what I was going to have to face. But essentially, yeah, it was definitely because I wanted to see safety for myself, safety for the coworkers that I cared so much about, safety for our customers, my family that I come home to every day. Bottom line, just basically safety and a sense of justice that I feel is very lacking in our modern world.
Thank you, Chance. Totally agree. John, can you share what motivated you and your coworkers to organize?
Yeah, so I did kind of mention this a little bit earlier. It was the collective sense of frustration in the store. Thankfully, nobody in our store has contracted COVID yet. But it was just the management not listening, just dismissing our concerns. But what was really helpful was through EWOC and through Tristan and the help and the training that we received was a way to vent our collective frustration in a creative way, which was really a motivating factor. Just the sense of unfairness in that, you know, the owners and bosses and Taco Bell as a corporation makes money hand over fist, and then to just summarily dismiss all of our complaints. That was the motivating factor. It's interesting too, though, being in Detroit, with the history of the labor movement from here, it's surprising to me how very little, because I work with a lot of high schoolers, a lot of high, staff turnover and these sorts of things. It's surprising to me how little my coworkers actually know, and the foundation of the historic labor movement and things like that was non-existent. So while that presented a challenge, because now you have to kind of re-educate your coworkers, hey, what is organizing, what can we do? You have to start from the very basics. It presented a unique opportunity because it's a chance to educate other young people, other people my age, to see that when you actually do organize and come together with your collective power, and once we won that first demand, you can tell that frustration, they began to see the light bulb clicked on. They're like, oh, this works. But yeah, it was definitely that collective frustration that was a motivating factor for us.
Makes a lot of sense. Bryce, I'm wondering, just one final question. I have one question for you, and then I think one question for Monisa, and then I know we're at 9. I really appreciate folks staying a little bit longer. But Bryce, I'm wondering what role you think workers will play to win justice as this crisis continues. Here we are, August, COVID is not going anywhere. In fact, people are saying we're going back to work, schools are starting. What role do you think that workers play in fighting for justice as this crisis continues?
Workers play a vital role in this. For our local, one of the things that we do and we always push for is to do meet and confer. Meet and confer with managers or whoever. If it's a city chapter, meet and confer with the city manager, mayor, members of the council, city council, having that one-on-one, having those meetings, voicing our concerns as a local or union, and then just staying on them about it. Just keep hitting them with it. We are very good at we know that our local, we try to have allies, within city council, this, and the third. But at the same time, if you're gonna talk, you need to walk it too. And we always challenge those folks. We will do a press conference in a heartbeat. We'll do it very quick, and we'll call them out on stuff they have said at the time. And then usually some things get moving very quickly. But the meet and confer is part of that. Having these steady meetings with these leaders, and then having our members engage, keeping them informed, teaching, educating on the workplace rights and laws of workers, keeping them informed on things that we're doing, not only within the chapter itself, but across this local, because that is encouraging to our members of each chapter to see that, hey, this city or this other city, okay, they're dealing with what we're dealing with, but they actually managed to do this. Maybe we need to do this. This is what we do with our councils. We kind of bounce ideas off each other. Our executive board bring it, with the executive board leadership, we try to keep these ideas bouncing between each chapter to figure out how can we move forward with our demands and our vision. But we learned, and this is mostly, I've only been in unions since 2016, and I've learned the history of our union since the 80s in our North Carolina chapter. And knowing your history is where you need to go moving forward and where you stand in it. But the meeting confer, the constant engaging with our members, because we are the ones that are out there. We are the ones who provide the better feedback. And we're the ones that need to be at the table when they're making decisions, when they're always talking about, we care for you. You guys, this and the third. No, we're going to be there. We're going to make you prove your point. We're going to make you, walk the walk on this. So it is. We do play a vital role. I encourage everybody to try to, as you are organizing, and you ever get established, have those meet and confer, because that gives them feedback on what's going on, and then we can kind of see where they're at, and then wherever they're lacking, we come together as a chapter or local and say, hey, okay, they're not doing this third. Let's bring this up. Like pay. Hazard pay was a big deal. Some cities worded it as premium pay. They try to give it something else to make it seem like. So we had to challenge them on that. Our city workers out of Charlotte, when they learned that city of Greensboro was making more in premium pay, they decided, we need to do the same thing. So they kind of went after their folks in their city to get more of their more in premium pay as well. So that's what I feel about that.
Thank you, Bryce. It was really powerful. When you say you and your coworkers have been doing so much incredible organizing at the Field Museum in Chicago, we have a lot of people on the line right now, people people working, thinking about what they're going to do. And I'm wondering if you just have any message that you want to share with workers who are listening today or might listen to this recording in the future.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I thought hard about what I might say if I had to address, anyone who is looking to organize or fighting for their rights or anything like that. And, there's a lot of cliches that you can say. But something I was really thinking about was that, fighting for your rights as workers, and being a part of the working class is a lot of ways in tandem with all of the other kinds of injustice, and ways you can be affected in this country that are disproportionate compared to the people who are designed to be well off. As being a part of a working class, by the people at the top, we are by design struggling the way we are struggling. And so to that, I say, as cliche as it sounds, that the efforts and concerns that you have are really, really valid and don't go unnoticed when you use your collective right to live and to work in comfort and security, and that comfort and security are not privileges, those are rights. And so fighting for the long haul isn't easy, and it opens up a lot of vulnerabilities about you and your communities and the people you are working with, but more than ever, especially now, that is going to do more good than harm, and it is well worth the fight.
Solidarity, Monisa. That was, thank you for sharing that. John, I saw you come back on your camera. I'm wondering if there's anything that you would also, any message you would want to make sure that workers listening hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have 10 years of experience in fast food. I think the biggest message that I'd like to get across is that we are all essential in the fast food industry. And I think so many of us just take it for granted. We're there in the morning to give you a cup of coffee. We're there at lunch to feed you as you're on your lunch break. We're there for dinner to feed your kids after school. We're often overlooked. But it's not just the fast food workers. We're all essential. And I think that's the message that I want to get across. The bosses can't do their job without us. We can do the job without them. And that's a huge thing for us to understand, is that anybody listening with a low-paying job, whether it's garbage collector, you're a postman, you're these bottom of the barrel, you have value, you are essential, but it's only if we come together collectively that we can use that power and take the frustration that we all feel from COVID. It's not an easy fight. It's not something that's going to take, we're going to win it, tomorrow. But it's just understanding that we've always been essential. That's the thing I can't stress enough, is that, so often we're overlooked, and it's about time that our bosses see us as essential too.
We are all essential. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for coming, being on this call. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Mike, Bryce, Monisa, John, Chance. This has been an incredible call. And I just want to say that this is just the beginning, right? This work is just starting. And I haven't asked for the 137 people who are still on this call. Do not leave yet, because we haven't asked. Because every single person on this call has a role to play in building this movement. And so I'm going to ask that each of you commit to it, that each of you commit to this fight. There are workers all over this country coming together to fight for safety, dignity, and respect. But it's not going to be easy. We're not going to do it. We're not going to win unless we all come together and fight for it. So what I want to ask you all to do is, I want you to make a choice. I want you to take a step. I want you to participate. I want you to say that you believe that we can stand up to Donald Trump. We can stand up to Joe Biden. And that together, we as workers can unite to make something change, right? That we can make a difference. And I think that there's a few things. I mean, there's so many things that we can do. But for this call here tonight, we're going to put a poll out, and I'm going to ask you all a few questions. And I'm going to ask you guys, one, if you want to organize your workplace, If you want to get involved in EWOC as a volunteer, if you want to let us know what's going on in your workplace, maybe you're not ready to organize, but you want to just like start feeling it out. So I'm going to ask Michael, who I think is running the call, if he can just put this poll out here. And if the people who are still on this call can take a minute to fill this out. First of all, who wants to organize their workplaces? If you say yes, let's do it. Yes, I'm ready to organize my workplace. I'm not ready, but I'm interested in learning more. Not yet. Let's see. Let's give people a few more seconds here. Awesome. This is really great. We have about 50% of people voted. The secret of these calls is that I can see the numbers. So I know some of you still need to put your votes in. We want to help you guys organize. You can fill it out. All right, looks like we're about tapering out. So we're gonna drop some links in the chat. If you wanna just like hold on to these for later, you can come back to them. But I think that, you know, what we wanna do is we wanna keep working together. We wanna keep organizing. Like I said, this is just the beginning. There's so much more work to do. But today, so one of our, you know, EWOC is a joint project of DSA and UE. And today the UE came out with a pamphlet that's entitled Them and Us. And I wanted to read one passage out from it because I think that it really kind of resonates with a lot of what we've been saying today. And I'm hoping that we can carry this passage with us. And I'm going to drop the link for the pamphlet so you all can read that too. But we must protect ourselves collectively. The struggle to better our working and living conditions is in vain unless we are united. The power of working people to advance our interests, resist employer attacks on our conditions, and reshape our society to serve the many, not only the few, can only be realized when we are united in purpose and action. I think this sums up so many of the things we have been talking about today, and I am so grateful and excited to be in this fight with all of you. We have so much more work to do, but I have faith that together we can do it. So solidarity, y'all. Looking forward to many more fights, many more calls. The struggle goes on. We'll talk to y'all soon.